Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. All right, I promised you guys some legends of the industry, and I deliver today with Michael Boyle. This is, first time having you on here. It's a big honor. And for those of you guys who are not familiar and living under rocks, he's the founder of Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning, MBSC, and I consider a pioneer and leading expert in strength and conditioning. You are the men's ice hockey head strength conditioning coach for Boston University. You actually work with the Boston Red Sox as their strength coach, and that included the 2013 World Series winning team. Before that, you work with the Boston Bruins. I mean, you've coached athletes that have grown up into or played in every major pro North American sports league. And you're also the author. For anybody who's listening to audio, I'm holding up your book, Advances in Functional Training. This is one of my favorite resources ever. And you've also written New Functional Training for Sport. I'm holding that one up. And Strength and Conditioning Coaching. So, and a mentor to greats like Ben Bruno and Kevin Carr. That's quite the resume. Welcome on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I've been very lucky. I've been able to do a lot of fun stuff in 40, I guess it's 43 years if my calculations are correct.
Impressive. All right. Dive right into a popular and sometimes polarizing topic. What's your take on kids specializing in one sport at a young age?
Oh, I always say, do you have a soapbox we can pull up for me to get onto? But I think it's an absolute. I think it is the disaster of youth sports right now. The early specialization thing, and I mainly say that because it doesn't work. And what I'm really, I guess, passionate about is I would like for kids to achieve whatever level of sport that they really want to achieve, and they're not going to do that if they specialize. Like, parents are so ill-informed here that they think, and I've said this, I did a really like a long form project with Pat Beef, like, I don't know, 9 hours or something on youth sports training. We called it complete youth training. Maybe it might even be 9 years ago now. And the research bears out very, very clearly that, as my friend Brandon Marcel likes to say, early to ripen, early to rot. And that the early succeeders, and you can look up the research on early succeeders. The early succeeder phenomenon is really common, where you see these kids who excel in age group primarily because they won the maturation Olympics. And as a result, they're far, far ahead of their peers. And those kids don't tend to do as well in general as kids who kind of take a slower path. But parents, us as adults, right, if we want to be whatever, great strength and conditioning coaches, great personal trainers, we really need to specialize. We need to really spend a lot of time refining our craft. But for a kid, what you're doing literally is you're laying the base of this pyramid. And the larger the base that you can lay, the larger the pyramid that you can build. I use, like, the difference is we want to build a pyramid versus an obelisk, right? If you study those structures, you know what I mean. We want something more akin to the pyramids of Egypt than the Bunker Hill Monument. And early specialization just doesn't do that. But parents and everybody, it's hard because every parent wants what's best for their child. I don't think I've ever met a parent who thinks, hey, I'm really here to screw up my kid's life and to make things not work out. But they don't do the requisite homework, and then they listen to these sort of pseudo experts who are almost always owners of single sport specialized, whatever, not franchises is the wrong word, but organizations, clubs, groups, whether it's volleyball or softball or ice hockey, or it just depends regionally where you are. Baseball, everybody's going in this direction, but they're all going in this direction for only one reason: money. And that guy or girl who encourages you to specialize usually encourages you to specialize because they need income year round. It's a tough industry to be in when you think, yeah, I'm going to be in whatever, the football world or the lacrosse world or the baseball world or the basketball world, but I got to make all my money in 3 or 4 months during this off-season period. So what they do is they sell this idea of, oh, you'll really get, the more you do, the more you'll get ahead. And then they sell the fear of being left behind. Idea that if you don't do this, your child, I wrote a Twitter post on it the other day because someone was talking about this with hockey, it's talking about U10 kids, and obviously you're in Canada, so going to the brick tournament and doing this and doing that. And I'm like, my daughter could barely stop at 9, 10. Literally could. I mean, she could skate forward. That was about the extent of it. She would smash into the boards regularly. By the time she was 15, she had a full college scholarship. She was as late a starter as you could probably see in that game. But the problem was she was a really good athlete. She was a state judo champion. She was the best goalie on the soccer team. She was the best forward on the soccer team on the day she didn't play goalie. She could, everything she picked up, she was good at. And hockey just became another one of those things. And it was the one that she really loved. And she got to go to college for that. My favorite, more recent, if you follow women's lacrosse at all, the kind of it girl in women's lacrosse is a girl named Charlotte North that trains with us. And Charlotte North is, I would say, if you asked anybody who the best women's lacrosse player in the United States was, I would say 9 out of 10 people would probably answer Charlotte North. Charlotte North was playing basketball and wanted to go to Duke for basketball up until 7th grade. And suddenly in 7th grade, one of her friends said, we need some more girls for the lacrosse team. And, the end of the story is she's 2-time national player of the year, going to be on our Olympic team, literally the best player in the world. And again, I jokingly, I had a picture of her in the presentation, and I said, in Massachusetts, we would have cut her because she started too late. We would have looked at her and said, oh, a good athlete, but, she's never going to make our select team because she's starting in 7th grade. So sorry. And that's why I said soapbox. I could probably soliloquy this whole cast for you on youth sports.
This episode is brought to you by Macros First. I've always struggled with nutrition tracking apps, even the slightest hassle or friction, and it breaks my habit. That changed with Macros First. When I tried it, I told my friend, the founder, Jacob, quote, this is, well, let's just call it a certain other app on steroids. It's the easiest app to use, and it has a free barcode scanner, which if you use tracking apps, you know that's a really big deal. I recommend Macros First to all my clients and friends, and even had them sponsor my 2024 conference. Here's an example feature I love. Auto-calculate food portions. Let's say you've got 30 grams of protein left for the day and you're thinking, how much chicken breast do I need to hit that? In other apps, you're left guessing serving sizes, hoping you get close to your 30-gram goal. With Macros First, just tell it the target you want to hit and it tells you exactly how much to eat. No more macro Tetris. Other apps ask, how much do you eat? Macros First also lets you ask, how much should I eat? And while Macros First's premium version is incredible for any user, the basic version, which is nowhere near basic, is free to use. So you can go to either Apple Store or Google Play to download. Is the Tiger Woods narrative part of what drives this? His hyper-specialization by his father at a young age, obviously the book. David Epstein's Range does a wonderful job of breaking this down, this whole phenomenon. His conclusions agree with yours, but Tiger is sort of the outlier. And then, of course, there's the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, who's notorious for misinterpreting and misrepresenting things that are going on. But he actually mentioned this phenomenon, especially in hockey, where the more physically mature players at a younger age get more specialization, more training, and then that's why they're disproportionately representing the NHL. So it's almost like he's presenting a different narrative than what you and what Epstein have.
Interesting because in Gladwell's in particular, I think it was representative more of the draft than of the league. And if you look, the superstars tended to be born in the last quarter of the year, October, November, December. If you look at, I think like Crosby, LeBron, Larry Bird, if you look at the real phenomenons, were born later, and they were effectively playing up by 9 months, by 3/4 of a year, by half a year, their whole life. And then if you look at a kid like Crosby was playing up, even playing up an age bracket, despite being an October birth date. Or he might even be November, but I mean, just this. So, and you're right. I think, Gladwell is one of these guys like, and I'm not calling Malcolm Gladwell a liar, but I do like the expression figures lie and liars figure, right? You can slant the data to tell the story that you want the data to tell sometimes. That's sometimes why, I can be a data fan and a data critic at the same time, because when you look at that, yes, there is absolutely positively, when you look at his data, and I think it was, I believe, Canadian junior national team was what he looked at from a data standpoint, and they were disproportionately older players. They were first quarter of the year, January, February, March. And again, it makes sense because my son's December birthday, so last month of the year. And I can remember him one day so he's in 04, he's December of 04, and we're watching tryouts one time, and he's watching the 05 kids try out, and he looks at me and he goes, "Dad, I would have been an unreal 05." And yep, if you'd been born 8 days later, you would be the best player on the team by a significant margin. Instead, as a December of 04, he had his work cut out for him. The difference was every year, initially, like some years he was way behind, and then he got closer, then he started to pass kids. And that's how it works in that process. That's why I think if you look like at guys, that are in the NHL, even if you look at the NHL, first round draft picks don't tend to make it. If you look at the numbers, there's probably as many undrafted free agents playing as there are first round draft picks. I think I actually saw that stat one time. And so it's just really easy and this goes back to sort of to your Tiger Woods question. It's easy to find an outlier, or it's easy to find something that supports your thought process. I look at someone like me. I've been doing this, as I said, 43 years, and I've always loved to interview my athletes and ask them about their athletic experience. And prior to this push for specialization, most of our best players were really good at another sport. It was very unusual that we would find a kid like coming to Boston University on a hockey scholarship who was a hockey specialist. And generally what you've seen, and I put this in my presentation, I remember with the Sedin brothers in Vancouver, and there was a story about the Sedins, and basically their strength coach said that when the Sedins were 14, they had to make a decision as to whether they were going to be pro hockey players, pro soccer players, or whether they were going to try to play professional netball, which is a game that's played in Europe. And he said because they were the best at all of those games, they just had to figure out which game they were going to really start to focus on. So there is this mid-late specialization thing that becomes really important in that 13, 14 age bracket. You may have to start dialing it in, but it's not at U10. That's the difference.
This episode is brought to you by Renaissance Periodization and the RP Hypertrophy app. RP is the industry leader in muscle building, coaching, and education. This app is like having a coach in your pocket. It gives you everything you need, including training programs, form videos, gives you all your sets, reps, and weights, so you just show up and follow the plan. It adjusts each week based off your progress. And the app was created by Dr. Mike Israetel, Nick Shaw, and the team at RP, who I've known for many years. And the entire team are incredible people who've always been supportive and generous with me, so I know their character and are easy to endorse. My library contains several RP books, and I've used RP training principles in my workouts and coaching with my clients for many years, long before the explosion in popularity of their YouTube channel, which is worth checking out. RP is the first sponsor I felt remotely comfortable endorsing after over 7 years of podcasting. And if hiring a one-on-one coach isn't for you, using the RP Hypertrophy app is the next best thing to maximize your gains and take the guesswork out of your program. And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free. If you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. And I've also got a serious discount for you of up to $50 US. Go to rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP, or go to the link below in the show notes, and that's rpstrength.com/coats. Use the code COATSRP. I think we have tons of examples historically in sports of major stars. I mean, Michael Jordan in baseball, although that may be a little overblown in how he was still definitely good at baseball, but the 2 years running to play baseball, there's actually some suggestion that that was a way to suspend him without actually suspending him publicly for some of the stuff that obviously The Last Dance addresses. So, but Danny Ainge is a famous basketball player. I grew up watching it. I think he was a 3-point star. Dave Winfield was the only, I mean, I'm dating myself. I watched the 92 Blue Jays win the World Series and Dave was on that team, but he was the only person ever to be drafted to 3 major pro North American sports. Like Tom Glavine, the Hall of Fame Major League Baseball pitcher, was drafted by the LA Kings. Deion Sanders,
Yep.
it goes on and on and on, right?
Oh, the best athlete I've ever trained was a guy named Carl Crawford.
Yeah.
Carl Crawford was a full scholarship to UCLA for basketball, a full scholarship to Nebraska for football, but then elected to sign with the Tampa Bay Rays and play Major League Baseball, never went to college. He was an absolutely ridiculous athlete. And all the guys that I talked to, Jacob deGrom just set I think he set the record for the fastest to
1,800 strikeouts. 1,800 strikeouts on a career. Yep.
deGrom did not pitch until college. In college, he was a relief pitcher. He did not become a starter until he got to Major League Baseball. We had a guy named John Lackey. Same thing. John Lackey was a real good, real solid Major League pitcher. Did not pitch in high school because he was playing quarterback. Didn't pick up. He literally picked up pitching in minor league professional baseball.
And Lackey was on that 2013 World Series team, right?
Yeah. One of my favorite guys actually on the team. Great guy. But what about talking to these people over and over again? Mia Hamm, I have a picture. Mia Hamm played middle school football, American football, at the request of her friends that were boys in the team. They said Mia was the fastest person in our group, and we convinced her to come out and play running back because she grew up in Texas, and I think she was like an Air Force brat, if my memory serves me. And Christine Lilly. So again, if you date yourself, Christine Lilly was probably, Mia Hamm might have been our greatest women's soccer player. Christine Lilly was probably our second best women's soccer player. Christine Lilly was a 3-sport captain in high school. She captained I think the field hockey team, the soccer team, and the softball team or the basketball, something. She was captain of 3 different sports. It happened all the time. And there's a great book, and this is going to end up, you're going to have to send this out as a youth sports podcast, but there's a great book called I Hope You Will Be Very Happy, Lessons from a Lifetime in Lacrosse, that was written by a guy named Dom Stargia, who was the Brown coach and then later the Virginia coach. And there's a really good chapter in there entitled, Can My Kid Play Division I? And when he talks about the fact, parents would always be coming to him and say, do you think my kid's a D1 player? And his response was always the same. Is your son the best player on another team at his school? He said, if he's not, he's probably not a Division I player. If he's a lacrosse, this kid was a lacrosse guy. If this kid thinks he can play Division I lacrosse and he's not the best player on the football team or the best player on the basketball team, he's probably not a Division I lacrosse player, because the Division I lacrosse player is the best athlete at his school, not just the best lacrosse player at his school. And so I think, as I said, the biggest problem is that the parents are denying what's right out in front of them in favor of a narrative that works better for them.
Do you think these kids are just so damned athletic that they are great at movement? They know how their bodies move in space. They're naturally great at force production. And then that just plays well with multiple sports? Or is it the fact that they get the exposure to multiple sports means that there's different lines of stress, patterns of stress on their bodies, so they're not getting too much repetitive wear and tear, which then lessens injury risk? Is it a combination of both?
I would say probably a combination of both. I'm trying to think of the title of the book, but at one point after the Gladwell book, there was a whole series of books on that same topic. And I think it was Genius in All of Us, if I'm not mistaken. I love Genius in All of Us. And one of the things that the guy said in Genius in All of Us was that the long-term key to success was actually passion more than talent. And that what you found is if you had a kid, what he basically talked about, and he also talked about the idea of genetics times environment. And he said it's a multiplier. So yeah, genetics, huge player. You look at the Kachuk brothers in the NHL, right? They got good genetics. Mom was a good athlete. Dad was a real good hockey player. They've got a sister that's playing field hockey, I think, at UVA. But the difference for them is the parents provided a really great environment for their kids to grow up into from a sporting standpoint. So I always say, if you can take 10 genetics and 10 environment and multiply, you get 100. In some situations, Carl Crawford might have been 10 genetics, but where he grew up in Houston was probably not a 10 environment. He came from a young single mom, but the genetics were so powerful that they still they still overwhelm environment. Our problem now is that we take people whose kids maybe don't have the genetics and they think they can buy the environment. And in some cases, you can do that and still get a pretty good multiplier out of that. If you look at it and think, hey, my kid's genetically a 5, but I'm giving him a 10 environment here, I'm giving him everything that's possible, then that kid will be better. But what I would tell those parents is what's possible for that kid is that you want a broader base. You want, I don't know if you've ever interviewed Greg Rose, but Greg Rose had he called it the cyclone circuit, which was something that they used for their young golfers. And basically it was the idea that they were going to go out. Part of their training was going to be kicking something, throwing something, striking something with another object. There were all these tasks that they were going to circuit that they really felt was going to develop the athleticism that they needed for that person that was eventually going to become the elite golfer. But it wasn't just golf. And even golf is one of those ones where you probably can practice yourself into being better at golf to some degree because the skills are relatively finite. Whereas you look at something, in golf, you're not really reacting to anything except the elements. Maybe the wind, right? Those types of elements. Whereas in hockey, you're reacting really significantly to other people. And, in most, so I think the team sport thing is different too than the individual sport thing. So I think obviously things like even, tennis where it's 1-on-1 or golf where it's kind of 1-on-0 or gymnastics where it's 1-on-0. You don't really have an opponent per se. Those sports might lend themselves better to specialization. Whereas I think the team sports, what people love to call invasion sports, probably don't.
That's fascinating because the next thing I was going to ask is because I think of strength and conditioning, resistance training as another type of sport for young people, but anybody to play because, again, different lines of stress, different forces acting on them. But to your point, that's a 1-on-0 sport and that you're not reacting to unpredictable forces and speeds and what have you of other people. But I guess your thoughts on that and anything that you have to encourage, let's say, parents to get their kids involved in resistance training.
Well, one, I think the good thing about resistance training is that everybody gets better. So I think I always used to, when I talk to parents and groups of parents or even to kids, I would say this is something that's very firmly in control that's going to improve again. And there'll be a genetic effect to this. Obviously, the more fast twitch fiber a kid has, the better they're going to adapt to the weight room. But at the same time, you can take somebody and you can clearly improve their physical outputs fairly easily, particularly with a younger, less experienced person. So I look at it and think strength and conditioning, speed development, power development, sprinting, plyos, that kind of stuff is the low-hanging fruit of sports performance because do it and take all the free stuff that it's going to give you when you look at it and think it's if you just dedicate yourself to it. We kind of talked, I was talking the other day, 2 times 52, right? Do it 2 days a week, 52 weeks a year. If you try to get 400 or 500, like my son has easily gotten 600 workouts in the last 6 years. No question. We very, very rarely miss days. And as a result, he's very strong and very fast relative to his peers. And it is not a genetic thing as much as it is just the fact that we availed ourselves of the value of consistency. You've probably read Slight Edge.
Absolutely. One of the first books I've read anywhere.
Oh, I love Slight Edge, right? But Olson says, right, show up and then keep showing up and then show up with a great attitude. And that's what you get from strength and conditioning that you might not get from other things. You might be going and doing other types of practices and not necessarily getting better as easily. Whereas in strength and conditioning, you very much get what you get out, what you put in, particularly in that early going.
All right. Hard pivot. Quote, "It makes me sad when I see former interns doing TikTok and Instagram trend videos. I feel like we failed them." Talk to me about this.
Oh, I've just had a couple of interns who've popped up. The one that particularly came to mind was there was a pistol squat standing on a dumbbell with sunglasses on. That's been popular lately. I don't know if you've seen these, but
Oh,
on
that's God. I think I don't know if it was Cardi B or what of the like. I feel like I'm dating myself when I laugh at like the modern pop culture stuff because I'm 47, and I know a couple of female fitness entrepreneurs that I really like. They posed themselves. They were able to sit. I think they were wearing a high heel,
Yep.
cross-legged, and I mean, like, I get it as like a piece of performance, what have you. I think that what they're doing is they're just challenging themselves to do this. But yes, this thing has been a trend lately. Lord knows I couldn't do this shit.
Right. And so that, and I saw a couple of those and I thought, my God, these people wasted 12 weeks or 14 weeks or 16 weeks or whatever it was with us in terms of this is what they're choosing to put on their Instagram.
Mm,
Like to me, it kind of goes beyond disappointing,
mm,
just in terms of, wow, I would have hoped that our education would have made them look at stuff like that and think, hey, that's not for me. And so when I see it, yes, it brings a little tear to my eye in terms of looking and thinking, wow, these people were really not paying attention. And so, yeah, and it's, you look at, I mean, no, should anybody be standing on a dumbbell on end? No, right? When the problem with this stuff is when it goes bad, it goes really bad. And the the thing that I don't like is that if you're trying to be an influencer, then you're going to influence.
mm,
And if you want to look at that and say, do I want to influence, if let's just say I'm a young woman, do I want to influence other young females who may be less athletic than I am to try something that could result in a fractured tibia
mm.
or an ankle fracture or whatever it is? And I don't think young kids don't think enough about that and look at it. They want to be an influencer in terms of they want to be cool. They want people to look at them and think, oh, she's cool or he's cool, versus looking at it and thinking, in being an influencer, I think I am an influencer, right?
Mm.
That's a responsibility. It's a significant responsibility, and it's a responsibility that I take really seriously in terms of if I'm going to advocate for something, I'm going to advocate for something that I think is going to be good for people as opposed to bad for people. So I guess that's where the disappointment comes in terms of you think, wow, they didn't really they didn't absorb the ethos of what we're doing.
Mm. This reminds me, it must have been a year or two ago. I remember seeing a post going very viral, and it was a coach had filmed this client, and this client would have been a lady. I'm assuming she was in her late 60s, if not in her 70s. And he had her doing a wild variety of very circus-like things. And a lot of people were applauding at how strong and incredible she was. And clearly she was. But the thing was, is a lot of the montage also showed her struggling to do these things and faltering, falling, what have you. And I'm like, this is extraordinarily dangerous and not worth celebrating, because I thought it was profoundly irresponsible of the coach. And I think the coach was just doing this crap for clicks and views while putting his client in genuine danger, because this woman was falling and crashing to the ground on these complicated balancing things. And again, I can celebrate the fact this woman was obviously very capable, and perhaps it was her idea to want to do these things, but I suspect very strongly it was his coach putting his client through a circus act. And we saw a positive outcome. If she'd gotten hurt, if she'd broken something and all this sort of stuff, we would have never seen this. How many people might have tried to replicate this? A client ends up fracturing a forearm, and all of a sudden there's no trace of this on their social media. They're getting sued.
Right. And it's really funny because I can remember for a while it was popular. Push-ups on kettlebells were popular,
Eh.
right? And it's the same thing. And I remember I was at breakfast, local breakfast place, and the waitress is working with her arm in a cast.
Mm.
And what happened? And she was like, I was at boot camp and we were doing those things where you do push-ups on the kettlebells, and my kettlebell flipped over and my arm snapped, and I was just like, that's why I tell everybody not to do that. Like that's, we talk, and again, and people always say, like I'm a chicken shit. I'm always worried about everybody getting hurt, whatever it is. But we always talk about risk reward.
Mm.
And what's the risk? What's the reward? There are going to be certain situations where the risk and reward are going to balance. Even if you look at Olympic lifting, right? Olympic lifting, probably more risk than not moving heavy weights slow, right? I mean, I like Olympic lifting, but when I'm dealing with young athletes, I think the risk justifies the reward because I really think there's a lot that I can get from Olympic lifting that's going to help these kids become more athletic. When I've suddenly got I get to the Red Sox and I'm like, there is no way I'm letting anybody do a hand clean with snatch. We're just not doing it. Like the risk, these guys are all in Major League Baseball. I'm not making Major League Baseball players here. I'm keeping Major League Baseball players healthy and performing. And so I think you've always got to be looking at what is your risk versus reward ratio and is it in your favor? And what ends up happening, and I mean, you've probably seen or read enough of my stuff, but I think we've got a lot, I call them beer and ice cream coaches. Like I like beer and I like ice cream. But if somebody asks me for nutrition advice, I don't look at them and think, beer and ice cream is really where it's at. It's really working for me. Right. But in strength and conditioning or in fitness or whatever it is, we got a lot of these kind of beer and ice cream coaches who just will say, well, this is what I do. And look at me. Like I have great results. I have a great body. I'm in great shape. And this is how I exercise. And their whole programming is built around just doing what they do. And I'm trying really hard to steer people away from that and to have people think about things like risk versus reward and to have people think about, saying like, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Like that's the kind of stuff you got to look at and think, am I really doing a service here or am I doing a disservice?
Ben Brunos says something very similar in his podcast appearances. He talks about how he works with a lot of elite athletes, your Clay Thompsons and other people. I think Chris Letang of the Pittsburgh Penguins. But they're already at the pros. These are freaks. These are absolute performance machines. And a big part of what Ben's trying to do is to make sure he's not breaking them. And I actually feel, bad for Ben. He seemed to handle it very well, but he's Halliburton's trainer. And of course, the NBA Finals, Halliburton goes down with an injury, and and I will call it straight out, a notorious clown in our industry put up a post, saying how he would have trained Halliburton to, have prevented this injury, and got nuked by everybody at our space from Joe to Franco, put up a rage post or what have you. But everybody came to Ben's defense. And I don't know if you have any insights on dealing with high level athletes and the injury risks and any of that sort of stuff.
Well, I mean, I think Ben does a really good job of that, honestly. And his, the nice thing about Ben, if you watch his training, I would say it's very similar to what we do. It's a lot of unilateral training. But it's pretty straight down the middle. You don't see a lot of circusy stuff. You will see some things that are intended to be challenging, but in a really safe way. And I responded to the Halliburton thing too. And I said, the crazy thing about this is that we're trying to blame somebody for an injury in June when the last training session with quote unquote said trainer probably took place in August of the previous year. So 10 months removed, somehow you become responsible, and for a guy who has elected of his own accord to play with a strained calf in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, knowing full well that he was at risk of exactly what happened to him. I guess to me, it's almost, dealing with professional athletes in that particular situation are kind of apples and oranges. I do think when you deal with professional athletes, I'd say this all the time. I spoke to the NBA strength coaches group a couple of weeks ago out in Las Vegas, and I said, we've got two different groups here because they bring a lot of college strength coaches in, and there's strength coaches from all over the world, really, from all over Europe. There's a guy from the Philippines. There were a couple of Russian guys there. I said, but there are those guys trying to get to the NBA, and there are those guys in the NBA. And the training programs in my mind, should be somewhat different because the guy who is already there, your job is to keep him there. The guy who is not yet there, your job is to get him there. That changes the risk reward because the reward is very high if you get him there. So when I'm looking at how I might train somebody at the collegiate level, I could say, hey, I'm going to take slightly more risk with this guy because the reward of an NBA contract could be really significant. flip that over and say, I'm training somebody who's on an NBA team already. Okay, we've already got, the reward has already been significant. Now what I would like to do is prolong the reward period. Okay. We'd like to get rewarded for 10 years, which means we're going to focus in on a very different thought process. And we're going to focus in on kind of a career longevity thing because you've got a career. And I said that when I first went to work for the Red Sox, that was the first thing I said was that you all got here without me. Everybody deserves to be listened to and respected based on the fact that you all got here. So I got ideas about training, and I'm going to tell you what those ideas are. And you're going to tell me your ideas about training because you did something that got you here. And then we're going to see how we mesh those ideas together in a way that's palatable to them and in a way that's palatable to me. It's not, I've seen other guys come in Major League Sports with this sort of, my way or the highway. I'm going to show everybody how to train. I'm going to change everything that gets done and get fired really quick. And I went in and kind of was more like, I'm going to kind of go in here pretty soft and let guys understand that I'm here to help them continue to excel, continue to do the things that they do well. And honestly, it worked out really well. By the end of spring training, the first year, I had every single guy on board. Everybody was great. I had one conflict, and it was literally our backup catcher who just didn't really like to lift weights. And part of me wanted to look and think, you're one of the probably lowest paid, least valuable guys here, and you're my one kind of headache is that you don't really want to work out. And
I guess
other guys that are making, millions and being really instrumental are very willingly doing whatever we ask them to do.
I always was a big fan of Gabe Kapler, so you would have worked with Gabe. And Gabe,
No, he was right before me. I missed him.
shoot,
I think he
okay,
was the Philly manager actually
okay, I got my timing wrong.
at the same time. Yeah.
Kapler's famous for he's on the cover of bodybuilding magazines. I mean, he's always been a fitness enthusiast. A shame. You made me think of something here, and I think there's a lot of anecdotes piled in here, but I think there's enough to suggest there's some truth to it. Most of the major pro athletes who have had incredible longevity, I think of someone like a Zdeno Chara who retired at 45 and then started running marathons, or your Rod Brindamores and Chris Chelioses and so many others. LeBron James is a good example. There's a handful of Tom Brady certainly took his physical fitness very very seriously. Kobe Bryant, and then there's the Danny Heatleys of the league who were stars but had a reputation for more wild at times, or maybe it's a Zion Williams in basketball who just seems to struggle with taking his strength and conditioning seriously. And these guys' bodies are breaking down due to injuries. And in Danny Heatley's case, I think he is a 50 goal scorer in the NHL, and a few seasons later, he's literally out of the league at 31 years of age.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely something to prolonging these careers. And as you alluded to, there's many millions of dollars on the line for this stuff.
Yeah, there is. And you're right, guys, right or wrong, whether you agree with sort of like, I'm an early stage Brady fan, not a late stage Brady fan. So I'm not
Fair.
I'm not a Zen Brady fan as much as I was the weightlifter Tom Brady of the early part of his career. But in any case, with those guys, there is a significant dedication to their physical well-being. And those guys, they take it really, really seriously. And there are guys, some guys, maybe played really hard and worked really hard. Chelios had a reputation as a guy. He was a lot of fun to be around, but the guys always said, sometimes I'd leave him late at night and I'd come back at 7 o'clock in the morning and he'd be riding the bike. And they were the guys who, as you said, the guys who lasted for a really long time tended to take care of themselves. I had a great group of guys, NHL guys, throughout my career. Interestingly enough, a bunch of them are, our general managers now. A bunch of them.
Don Sweeney.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have 6 GMs actually, which is crazy. Billy Guerin was a client of mine who was in Minnesota. Mike Greer is in San Jose. Billy Armstrong, who we had as a minor league guy with the Bruins, is in Utah. I can't even. Tom Fitzgerald is in New Jersey. Chris Drury is in New York. But and these were all guys but they were all part of the group, and they all were part of the group for years. and were really diligent about their training for years.
Mm.
And it carried over to them having really successful careers, long careers, and then going right into management and having really good careers again, and kind of, the cream rising to the top over that period of time. And then I could name as many guys on the other side as there are that way. And what you see with some guys is at the first real sniff of money, suddenly, hey, I'm throwing the brakes on hard here.
Mm.
All this working out and training stuff is for the birds now that I signed that first big contract. And I would say that's why I saw that with the NFL guys right away. And you realize why the NFL is, I think it's 3.4 years or something is the average career length. And the average, it's that way because it almost seems like invariably when that guy gets to the second contract, they just immediately shift that thing into cruise control and stop doing the things that got them there. And bang, relatively quickly, they're out of there again. And it's crazy to me because I would think that every pro athlete would be beating our door down saying, please train me, help me to bleed this league dry, help me to get every cent I can out of this thing. And there aren't. There is a certain group of guys, and I've been very lucky to have a lot of those guys, but I've seen a lot of other guys who I can remember we had some guys, and when I very first started, we had some guys who made the Bruins for the first time. And then suddenly the next year I couldn't corral them in. They were at celebrity golf tournaments and here and they were there and they were on vacation. And I said to one of the guys, I said, I got to remind you of one thing. I said, they do not invite the Providence Bruins to these events. I said, if you end up in the minors next year, you're not going to be as desirable a guest as you are this year. And some guys listened and thought, hey, you're right. Maybe I'm taking this a little too seriously. Other guys were just too busy living my life. So it happens.
Now, for the average listener here, the millions of pro sports may not be all that relatable, but how does this translate into the way that people might put the brakes on their resistance training as, well, life changes, they get deeper in their careers, families, etc.?
I just think I think it's human nature. If you look at it and think, is one of my favorite quotes. Anytime the going gets easy, check and see if you're going downhill. And I think that's what happens for a lot of people is they don't realize that, okay, I gotta keep climbing, or at least I gotta stay on the flat. I can't, you should never, when you get that second contract, what you should be thinking about is, can I get to the third contract? If you get to the third contract in most professional sports, you're probably set for life. You're probably in a situation where you will not have to work again. But if you get one contract, it's almost a kiss of death for you because you're going to go through a short period of time where you have an income in the $1 million range, and you're never going to see that again. I think that's why you see so many professional athletes have problems because your income curve your income curve should be this sort of slow, gradual climb up, right? In professional sports, it's very much the opposite. It's very high, and then boom, it drops down in some cases to nothing, and you're living off interest income. And most guys don't understand finance well enough to be able to look at this and think, wow, this isn't a long-term thing. And I had a friend who was the financial advisor for an agent that I used to do a lot of work with. And he would tell the guys, literally, he said, my instructions for you is that you live on 10% of what you make in year one. So if you signed $1 million deal, I want you to try to live on $100,000. He said, if we get to year two, you can try to live on $200,000. If we get to year three, you can try to live on $300,000. He said, and you can incrementally bring that up as your income goes up, but you have to, he was very big on the idea, you've got to figure out where you want to live and buy a place where you can live the rest of your life that you don't have to pay for. And then you've got to get enough money working for you, be it, whatever, stock market, bonds, but however you choose to invest, so that you will then have an income like that first year for the rest of your life. But most people, it's the exact opposite. They're buying multiple houses and multiple cars and taking care of family and taking care of friends. And then suddenly it all comes crashing down when they get released. And then you see a lot of some of the problems obviously are really dramatic, but there's a really good book, Quiet Strength. Tony Dungy wrote it.
Mhm.
And he talked about the stats. I actually have him in my computer, but he talked about the stats of NFL players. And I mean, the divorce rate is probably, I think the national divorce rate's like 50% anyway. And, the athlete divorce rate is like 80 or something crazy like that in terms of, because you imagine a spouse who thinks, hey, I married Mike and, Mike makes $1 million a year. And then suddenly one day you realize Mike has no income and no prospects, because when you're out, you're out. There's not a lot of second chance opportunities where people think, oh, you screwed up, we're going to let you come back and we'll give you a really good salary. Generally, that guy cannot probably find a job that is going to pay him 10% of what he was making as a professional athlete. Generally, like some guys are lucky in that they can get into broadcasting or television or whatever it is, but that's far from the norm.
And that's the Charles Barkleys and the Shaquille O'Neals, who are the biggest personalities and Hall of Fame caliber players anyway, usually.
Yeah. Shannon Sharps, those guys. I mean, those guys are out there, but they're not representative of the larger group. And really the larger group, that 3.5-year group, you don't even know those guys' names. Unless they played for your local team. I might know some names from the Patriots of guys like, oh yeah, this guy played 3 seasons for the Patriots or 2 seasons for the Patriots and then was out. And I might recognize the name. You wouldn't recognize the name in Canada. So yeah, I think the agents in some ways and the teams, I don't think they serve these players well and I don't know if you can really change it, but by not at least explaining the economics of things like income curves and how this is going to work. I think there should, and I think they're doing a better job with it now through the Players Association, but there should almost be like a scared straight program for these guys where you think, okay, here's what can happen. And a lot of it's not good.
Here's a quick story about a former New England Patriot who's a pal of mine named Mark Magna. And he's been a guest in the past. And I met him at a 2021 event, Luca Hosvar's event. Mark's got a great story, but he played years in the CFL. He had about 1 season, some games with the Patriots. And then he started over as a personal trainer with not a whole lot. He ended up actually working with Alex Rodriguez. So lucky strike there. But now he's the co-owner of a series of gyms called Anatomy in Miami. But he worked his ass off to build that back up again. But yeah, he's an interesting story. And you didn't react when you heard the name, so I'm not even sure if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, no, I do know the name. I'm like, but I couldn't honestly. For some reason, I would tell you he was like a backup linebacker if I was.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it, right? Absolutely what it was.
And that's what I mean. So, like, I know the name, but you look at that and think, I mean, most of those guys, you need to figure out. There is no plan B. That's the problem for most of these guys, is that there's no, hey, this is what I'm going to do after, or this is what I'm going to do with the money that I'm making. This is, and guys, guys invest in bars, they invest in restaurants, they invest in things that are notorious for failure, as opposed to looking at and investing. I'd be investing in freaking laundromats and car washes and commercial real estate and things that have really high success rates and things that smart entrepreneurs invest in.
Let's have a little bit more fun, then I'll let you go. You got some stuff to do today. Quote, and I think this will be a metaphor for everybody. I'm so happy I can block and mute. There are genuinely crazy people out there, and I'm only referring to the fitness world. Talk to me about that.
Exactly what it says. I'm so happy I can block and mute, because people complain too much about social media. And whenever they complain, I say, you got to block and you got to mute, because you choose who you interact with. And I could literally give you the name of 10 idiots that I've blocked, who I just think, I don't want to deal with them. I know who they are. They're angry contrarians. They're only on social media to argue. They enjoy it more when they can engage somebody like me in the argument with them because it makes them feel smarter or look smarter in their own eyes. So it's like, I just pretend those people don't exist. And you can just literally do that and be like, block, person doesn't exist. They're gone. And I don't know why everybody doesn't do it because, and I did a podcast yesterday and I said, social media is here to stay. Social media it's not a fad. And much like if we look at the developments of the television or the computer, of the cellular phone, of these things, social media is in that same line. And when you choose to not engage in it, you're the same as someone who said, oh, I never got a TV, or I never bought a computer, or I never got a cell phone. I mean, none of those things are showing me that you're intelligent, right? No, I'm not looking at those and thinking, oh, yeah, you were really smart. Yeah, you skipped that computer fad. And, you end up in a situation where you've got to be able to look at stuff and think, how do I use this advantage? I can't remember the book, but I realized very early on that I was an early adopter. I didn't know I was an early adopter, but I was an early adopter. When computers became, when you could get a personal computer, I went and got a personal computer. I got a little laptop computer. I had no idea. I really thought it was a word processor, truly. I didn't even understand how it stored information. I can remember the guy asking me about how much memory did I want. And I was like, you got a box of discs over there, right? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, what do I need memory for? I said, I can just keep chucking discs in this thing and whatever I want to throw on there, I could put on the disc. And the guy just kind of looked at me like this, like, really? Like, oh my, you're buying a computer, you idiot. But I honestly don't have any idea how it worked. I can remember I've told this story a bunch of times, but so you said you're 47? Did you say?
47. Yeah.
47. You look good. But so you're almost 20 years younger than me. But I can remember, do you remember slide carousels? Did you ever give a presentation where you had to bring actual slides with you and you placed them on top of a slide projector and they dropped down in?
Oh, I remember stuff like that. I remember the old high school projectors where you put the plastic thing on the projector.
Yeah.
And it played all that old school shit. Yeah.
Right. So, I was at an NSCA convention and I'm watching Boyd Epley is presenting, and Boyd Epley does not have any slides. He's up on there and he's got his thing is projecting up on the wall, and I'm sitting next to somebody and I'm looking and I'm like, what is going on here? And the guy looks at me and goes, it's in his computer. Like, what's in his computer? He's like, the whole presentation is in his computer. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it's called PowerPoint. I was like somebody in a cave watching somebody rub two sticks together, right, and make fire. And I'm sitting there thinking, he didn't bring a freaking slide carousel with him. Like, he didn't have to put that in his suitcase and, organize it. And somehow PowerPoint, he's made all his slides already. But I immediately, when I went back, I was like, okay, I got to figure out what PowerPoint is. I got to go and find PowerPoint. And then I remember I saw Mike Clark, NASM Mike Clark, who you would probably remember.
Yeah.
But Mike Clark gets up and now he's got PowerPoint and he's got video. And I'm thinking, because we used to, the early Perform Better shows, we brought VCRs and I had a camcorder. I recorded my videos with a camcorder on a big VHS tape. And then we put the VHS tape into a VCR that Perform Better Chris Poirier had brought to the show with us, and it hooked up to be able to project onto the screen. And that was how we got video. And I can remember Mike Clark. I looked at Mike Clark and I was like, Mike, what did you do? And he's like, oh, I got a digital camera and I just downloaded the MPEGs onto my computer and then I uploaded the MPEGs into PowerPoint. And I was like, oh. I was like, what the fuck is an MPEG? Like, I had no, I literally, it was like he had just given a Chinese soliloquy to me. Like, I had absolutely no idea. I'm like, yeah, you just download the MPEGs. I should have thought of that, And I went back and I was like, I had a kid that was kind of tech savvy that worked with me. And I'm like, what is an MPEG? And he's like, oh, it's a file format for a digital video file. And so same thing, went out, bought a digital video camera, or, so I could take digital video, and then figured out how to get that into my computer. But so I guess the point being, you got to keep up with the times, but you also don't have to subject yourself to all these idiots in terms of, I don't follow Joel Seedman, right? I don't have to watch that stuff every day. There are guys like that I just think, okay, not interested on what they're selling. And I always say, you can curate your own feed. You can surround yourself with people either that think like you or that make you think or that you like or whatever it is, but you curate your own feed. And I always look at it and think, I curate for other people because I repost a lot. I'll repost and think this was really good. So maybe that gets somebody else some followers, which is great. Not that it matters, but you are the curator of your feed.
And very much why I choose my guests the way I do, because I want my audience to go and dig into your resources. And again, there's a lot of enthusiasts listening, and you guys benefit too. But I'm going to shout this book out again, like Advanced in Functional Training. I mean, you wrote this years ago. This thing's spectacular. I learned more about training everyday people, not just athletes, from this book than any other singular resource when I read it, right? So really influential book. I love it. I think everybody should get it. And I enjoy your media, and sometimes it inspires me, so I'll have a little fun here. Must have been a couple of years ago, and you'd posted something you didn't like, box squats. And I read your post, and I was like, I'm a fan of box squats. Let me break this down. So I actually wrote an article for T Nation, and half of it was, all right, here's all the things, how people coach them wrong. Here's all the problems, blah, blah, blah. Here's what they're actually useful for, video and everything. And I actually went into great depth. And it wasn't to be contrarian. It was actually to go, okay, cool. Let's actually tease out why a lot of people struggle with this and how it can actually be used really effectively. So it inspired something that I was actually really proud of. So I'll send it to you. Hey,
yeah, please. Like I said,
you might rip it apart.
and I think I'm going to redo Advances in Functional Training because I think there's a lot of that could be updated. I'm actually in the process right now. The one that you held, the other one, New Functional Training for Sports. I'm doing the 3rd edition of that one because that was almost 10 years ago and needs updating. But
and the other book, so I think it was retitled, right? Because I think at one point it was titled Strength and Conditioning Coaching, but which way was it flipped? Because it was also designed.
It was designing strength training programs at facilities. And what happened is Larry Draper, who was on Target Publications, who was kind of instrumental in getting Advances published, basically is kind of winding down her business. And Human Kinetics said, I think they thought designing strength training programs at facilities was a book that undersold based on maybe not being translated, not a big enough market, whatever it was. So they offered to buy that book from her and I, and they said, we want to retitle it. We want you to go in, update it as much as you not rewrite it, but update it. And then we're going to redistribute it with that title. And probably what they'll end up doing, because they've got a really robust kind of translation program. So they'll probably get that book into a lot of languages. Like if you look at New Functional Training for Sports is in, I don't even know, maybe 10, 12, 14 languages because Human Kinetics has relationships all across Europe with countries. And so I think the reach will be better, and Advances is in a lot of languages too anyway, but I just think this stuff, I think 2000, I'm going to say 13 or might even have been 2008 or 9 that I wrote that. So some of the articles in there I probably would look at and think, maybe I don't 100% agree with what I wrote at that point in time. But the interesting thing about that, and I'm sure, have you had Dan John on?
Quite a long time ago, I got to meet him at an event he was speaking at that I attended and have dinner with him. And Dan is a legend again.
Yeah, brilliant guy. I love Dan. I like everything about Dan. But I had read I think Never Let Go was one of the first Dan John books. And I had always read his T Nation stuff. And then I read everything that he wrote on I forget what the name of, he had a personal website where he had all kinds of stuff that was up in there. And I read all of it because I found his thought process really interesting. But when I saw Never Let Go, I thought, wow, I read a lot of this stuff before, either on his website or on T Nation or whatever it was. And then I talked to Larry and I said, was Dan's book a compilation? And she said, yeah, I took a lot of his writings and rolled them together. And that kind of became Never Let Go. And I said, wow, I've got a lot of stuff that I've written since Functional Training for Sports. And I'd love to do that. So I just started going through all my computer files and pulling all these articles together. And Larry did a brilliant job of making it a book, like piecing it together and saying, okay, this is the core section. These things should all be in here. And then this is the whatever unilateral training section. I forget how she broke it down. But it was really, if you look, a lot of those articles they might have been on T-Nation at one point in time. They were in a bunch of different places, and they all became advances in functional training, which is kind of one of those things you look at and say, I've told this story to a bunch, but it's worth telling on another podcast, because I got a call from Human Kinetics, and I think at that time I might even have gotten a letter, because it would have been 2001 or 2002, and saying that they wanted me to, they were interested in me writing a book called Functional Training for Sports. And there was a phone number to contact. I think the guy's name was Ed Burke, if my memory serves me, who was then what they would call an acquisitions editor. So his job was basically to get people to write books. That's what he did. And I called him up and I said, really flattering that you guys would like me to write a book. I don't think I know what functional training is, so I'm probably not the guy for you to write this functional training for sports book. And his response was, we think what you're doing is functional training. And I remember saying to him, so I can just write a book about the way that we're training right now. You guys will call it functional training for sports and sell it and market it. And he said, pretty much, yeah. And I thought, I could probably do that. I could probably write a book about how we train, provided this is, never realizing that it's sort of, I'm going to be this forever the functional guy, right? And then I'm going to be lumped in with people standing on a Bosu ball with their eyes closed, or stocking cap over their face or something. And, and it's really interesting. But then when you go to the next book, you think, well, what's this book called? Well, obviously it's Advances in Functional Training, right? Because the first one was Functional Training for Sports. And then you do the first DVD series, and, well, what are we going to call it? Well, I guess Functional Strength Coach, right? So you kind of end up really, wow, we've gone down this road. Might as well keep going.
It's funny you mentioned the acquisitions editor at Human Kinetics. So the former Corey Van Wyck, I'll give him a shout out, is a friend of mine, and he was bugging me. And I don't have the time bandwidth to write a book, but he was bugging me to come and write something for them. And I guess now he's moved on, but I just got an email a couple days ago, because I'll be at an event where there'll be a Human Kinetics booth at Campit Pro Global. By the time everybody listens to this, it'll already be over. And so she wants to make sure to meet up as well. So I have a funny suspicion there'll be a renewed effort to get me to come write a book for them. But Human Kinetics are great. So many friends of mine and friends and colleagues of yours have written books for them. There's a whole bunch of cool lessons in here. And again, the enthusiasts will take stuff from this too, but for the coaches especially, Mike, you've been an early adopter at a lot of stuff, whether it's technology, media. You documented what you were doing, and that turned into, a very big profile in our industry, a leadership position, presenting at a lot of conferences, writing a lot of books, and functioning as a mentor for a lot of the greats of our industry, whether directly, like again, I mentioned Ben Bruno, or, people like Luca Hocevar, who's always held you up as a significant mentor and role model in his career, right? And he's been very successful. So
Great.
People can find you on both Instagram. So it's at Michael_Boyle 1959. That's Instagram. And then you're also very active on Twitter, or X, at Boyle 1959. Gee, I wonder what year you were born in. So everybody should go and check you out there. Any other resources you want to point people to?
Strengthcoach.com, which is I think I probably spend more time on that than I do on anything else. And it's something I have to put more effort into building that up. We've got a really good forum. I always think, I try to explain to people, it's $15 a month to get any question that you want answered, not just by me, but by a lot of really smart people, and to be able to kind of be part of the community. So that's the one sometimes that I look, and I mean, people are clearly steering away from the paid sites now, because there's so much free content between YouTube and Instagram and X. But I really think that strengthcoach.com is a really good resource for somebody, whether it's business stuff or training stuff, just because it's still really relatively affordable at, $14.95 a month.
Amazing. You guys also usually do an annual event as well. I know I mentioned Luca. Luca's spoken at it. Kevin Carr obviously is a very big part of that. So When is that? When's the next one of those?
The next one of those will be next spring. So it will probably be next March or April. We tend to do it. It used to be the winter seminar, and I think we had 3 winters in a row where it managed to snow on us during that time, and people either had trouble getting in, didn't get in, or didn't get out. And we started to realize, hey, why don't we just push this into the spring and eliminate the elements as being a player in this thing. So now it's usually March or April. Kevin really does. Kevin sets that up. What we do, it's very interesting because we sit down and think, hey, who do we want to hear? And we tend to bring, like you said, Luke has been there, Jake Tura. Last year we brought David Gray in from Ireland. We try to look and think, is there somebody out there that we think is doing a good job on social media from a training perspective who we'd like to spend a little bit more time around or listening to? And then it's a really good springboard for a lot of our own staff people, because we probably have, besides Kevin and I, there's probably at least 3 or 4 staff members that will speak. And it gives staff members a real opportunity to put a presentation together, to get up in front of a fairly large audience. Because we probably had over 200 people this year, and, on the in-person part. And so they get to present, they get to kind of work on their game a little bit. So it's a very much a win-win-win situation in terms of, it's kind of an annual reunion because we get people come back now year after year. So we get a lot of people coming back because they like the social aspect of the event. It's great for us because we get to hear some speakers that we haven't had at the facility before. And then it's really good for our staff because they get to get up in front of a fairly large group and present. So it's got a lot of positives.
Okay, I'm going to take a serious look and see if I can get over to that next year, and it doesn't conflict with some of the events that I've done.
Maybe you can come and be one of our guest presenters. So
I would kill for the opportunity, but we can talk about that in future. Let me earn that first. Everybody, Mike Boyle, go please follow his media. There is a wealth and legacy of great stuff there. So Mike, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure talking to you.